Welcome everyone, and thank you all for joining this week's Next Normal series from Worth Live on why continuing to learn in an online world is crucial. Firstly, I hope you and your loved ones are keeping well during what has and continues to be a challenging time for so many people. I'm Juliet, Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media and your moderator for today, and I'm delighted to be joined by our special guests, Dr. Vishal, Punwani and Emma Giles, founders of Sophya, Kevin Entwistle, Private Wealth Advisor at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, and Kathy Entwistle, also Private Wealth Advisor at Morgan Stanley. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Juliet.
Hello.
It's great to see you all. Hi. So a lot of you are aware by now our intention at Worth is to create conversations that help inspire and inform our community, many of whom are founders, investors, and business leaders who want to leave a positive impact on the world and help create a more inclusive and equal economy for the benefit of everyone. And we call that Worth Beyond Wealth. So we hope you enjoy this session and find it insightful and valuable. Forward thinking is really the essence of this series, The Next Normal, where Worth is looking ahead to what the world looks like in this new environment that we're now all living in. And school is back in session for students this week, but the pursuit of education doesn't stop there. So sites like Sophya, a learning platform, have made it easy and accessible for adults across all walks of life to learn more about virtually anything. And one study found that in the US, searches related to online learning quadrupled in late March and early April. So we're delighted to be joined by Bish and Emma, founders of Sophya, Kevin and Kathy Entwistle, Private Wealth Advisors at Morgan Stanley, to share their perspectives on how learning has transformed this year and how online learning could be the way forward for us all in this new normal. So a few housekeeping rules before we get started. This is a conversation and we really do welcome questions from you in the audience. You're muted on entry into this session, but please do use the live chat function or the Q&A. And we'll take a look at those comments and those questions and we'll weave them in as we go to the conversation. So let's get started. Lifelong learning and why continuing to learn in an online world is crucial. Firstly, a sort of personal check-in. I'd love to kind of hear a bit about your journey. Emma, let's start with you. Just briefly about your background and then how you came to founding this company.
Yeah, thanks, Juliet. It's really awesome to be here. So thanks everyone for joining. I hope you're all doing well. Vish and I actually have a similar background. We've been working on a lot of education projects for many years. My background actually was in biology and psychology. I took like a really keen interest into the brain and how people learn, what impacts learning, and all of those like very cool, quirky science things. And so when I took that passion that I had to actually apply it to the real world and to help learners out in the wild, and that brought me to Khan Academy. So a lot of people here maybe have heard of Khan Academy. Khan Academy is an incredible not-for-profit, big education space, creates a lot of content and quizzes for anyone in the world to learn anything, pretty much. So I created a lot of the health and medicine content for Khan Academy. And really like took my passion for helping people learn well and applied it to sort of the whole world, allowing me to see that impact at scale. Vish and I actually worked there together, and then we took that interest in seeing, okay, well, how can we actually tackle problems that vary at scale? One of the things with Khan Academy is that you often create a piece of content that helps, one piece of content that helps many, and we wanted to see what the problem was like when you take one problem that has many different solutions that's needed. And so we took that interest to the World Health Organization and tackled problems of taking programs like smoking cessation and developing data platforms to deal with that problem in different countries. India is very different than Switzerland, for example. And so through those different experiences, we really were able to like hone in on what part of like sort of the learning, the data, the scaling of problems like this we wanted to focus on. And that's how we converged on Sophya, which is the company that we run now, and ended up at Harvard Innovation Labs and have just gone from there.
That's great, and we'll learn a bit more about Sophia during this conversation. But Vish, I'd love to come to you next. How are you doing personally? How has the last 6 months been for you?
Yeah. So yes, thanks everyone for having us. This is wonderful. Doing really well, as can be expected now. We're normally headquartered in Boston, and the COVID sort of lockdown situation is a little bit different there. So the city was quite locked down early on, March, April, started to loosen up a bit, June, July-ish, and restrictions are allowing people to get out and exercise and do a little bit more now. But we looked across the border, and we also have Canadian citizenship. So we said, what's Vancouver like? So we came over to Vancouver about a month ago, and it has been very helpful just to get sort of clear-headed and running the business and sort of living again. So it's just interesting comparing and contrasting the two sort of high caliber cities and seeing what happens with your mental state when you go from one to the other. So net good over the past 6 months, very good in Vancouver in particular. Yeah.
And just share, Vish, a little bit. I know Emma touched on it, but sort of how you came about founding Sophia together.
Yeah. So just like Emma said, there's been a lot of projects we've worked on in the past. She didn't mention, but we used to teach anatomy and biology together in undergrad. That's where we met. And then when we went to Khan Academy, we were sort of a good 1-2 punch for the health and medicine team. So that was great. We managed to learn a lot about the online space, to see a lot of the statistics and the data behind how people were learning and how many people where were being affected in what ways. And we would get sort of daily messages from people who saw the content that we made, with just really kind words of how much the nonprofit had helped them. So we said, okay, so it's possible to make a really big dent if you sort of attack problems at scale. Because as you guys know, you need to be able to do things both at scale, but also boots on the ground, and sort of that was a good way to tackle both. We sort of took those learnings, and at the WHO, the additional piece that came was, hey, what happens when you create like a personalized learning system for different countries? Well, that's like a whole different level of scale, right? And so it gave us just the ability to see what could happen if we were to build out sort of a platform that allows personalized learning. And so all of that, again, culminated in Sophia, in which we provide sort of data-driven personalized learning for individuals. And so we kind of took the best of the two worlds and the learnings from the two places to found Sophia at the Harvard Innovation Labs in 2018. And since then, it's just been an amazing journey of discovery and talking to people every day about how their trajectories are changing because of using Sophia. I think the thing that makes us the happiest is that it doesn't matter where these people are from, right? You don't need to go to Harvard or live in New York or be in Vancouver or whatever. You could be in any country. I'm originally from Jamaica, and while Jamaica is very wealthy in some parts of Jamaica it isn't. And so it's nice to be contributing to and building something that can use data from every sort of person who's doing well and use that sort of funneled into helping every other person do really well too.
Thank you. And it's lovely to see Kathy and Kevin on here today. Kevin, I want to say hi to you first and welcome. It's great to have you on here. A couple of things. I think you do a lot of work with your client. A lot of your clients are founders. So I'd love you just to share a bit about that, and also how you and Vish met, because it's also quite a nice story, I think.
Of course, happy to, and thank you for having me on. I've been following the episodes all year, and you've done a great job, so hats off to you for all the hard work. It's certainly a great show. So for entrepreneurs that we work with, it's actually, it's funny, we have a newsletter we put out every week, And I would say 80% of the people who subscribe are founders, whether they're clients or followers or just trying to learn more. And every time I ask for feedback, they always tell me it's personal finance. And for many months, I had thought they want me to speak the language of entrepreneurship. We have credentials in value acceleration, pre-exit planning. And every time they came back and said, we just want to hear more about what we should do with our own wealth management. And so the way I describe how we try to help with people is if you think of like an X, so and you have a chart, many times people on a standardized career path, their human capital starts out really high and their financial capital starts out really low. And then as they get older, their financial capital grows and their human capital starts to go down. So it's like an inverse relationship. And our whole goal is to get earlier than when they cross. That's like, we want to be part of the transition where I think disruption in our industry and finance is happening in that space, whereas a lot of advisors are focused on the after transition, the post liquidity. We're trying to really get ahead of that and be part of the journey so that we can help plan before habits and decisions are made. So that's where we're finding a lot of, you know, activity and excitement these days. And I would echo what Vish had to say, that it's a tough year. There's a lot of pause and chance for thought, but at the same time, there's a lot of really good opportunity to stop and think and really help people right now.
Thank you. And tell us about that Uber ride.
Of course. So we have a podcast, and I was just finishing up. It was actually the race director of the Boston Marathon. So I was at the Warrior Ice Arena in Boston, had a great interview. I was all excited. I came into the Uber, and it was an Uber pool. I like to meet people, so I figured, why not? And we stopped at the Harvard Innovation Lab, where we picked up Vish, and we had a great conversation in the car, in the backseat of who knows whose car that was. And we drove along the Charles River and swapped some stories. And by the end of the, 10-minute car ride, Vish and I swapped cards, and we've stayed in touch ever since.
I love that. It's such a great story. And Kathy, hi. I'd love for you to share. I mean, we've worked together and partnered together for some time now. And I think what always strikes me is you have this amazing ability and balance to not only talk about personal finance and financial planning, but also link it to people's lives and values and the way that they want to live their life. So I'd love you just to share a bit about what you do and how you work with clients.
Sure, thanks, Juliet. And it's great, Emma and Vish, to see both of you. I think the last time I saw you was when you were presenting with Kevin at a founders event. So it's great to see you both. So for us, it's really important to understand the client first. So we look at it as like understanding their priorities when it comes to their values and goals, who the important relationships are in their lives, and matching up their resources to those values and goals to help them reach them. So we usually start like with that discovery meeting of really understanding what is important to the individual. And then I like to say that, we do what's called investment consulting, where we're, looking at risk, we're looking at a portfolio composition and all of that. That's important. But then we take it another step further and we add advanced planning into that, because we want, most of our clients are really concerned about things like tax mitigation or wealth protection. So we try to look at wealth transfer, wealth enhancement, wealth protection, and any charitable giving or any of those things that are important to clients. And we bring all of our resources to our clients to help them with that. And then the last thing that we do is we do relationship management for our clients. And what that means is not only on our team do we have a lot of support who helps our clients with any of their questions or needs, and we like to give a lot of support, but we also like to bring into the fold other experts or advisors, the professionals that either our clients are working with or that we are working with and we can help introduce them to, so that we're coordinating efforts with the attorneys and the CPAs and all of that to focus on our clients and how we can best help them. And that's really what we do. Just try to take clients from where they started to, my lights just went out, to where they need to be.
Thank you. And so I wanted to, moving on to like the learning environment and operating a virtual learning platform. What's it been like over the past 6 months, Emma and Vish, and sort of navigating the past 6 months? Like, we know that obviously the demand for online learning has increased, but how has it been building and trying to scale a business during this time, and an online learning business?
Yeah, I love what you said, Kevin. You said in all the challenges of this year, there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that is something that we've really realized. So when everything started, we're still a pretty early stage startup, building a lot of the plane as we fly. And so when we, around March, end of February, that's when I think we all really realized something really different was happening. And in our space, and I think in most early stage startup spaces, we realized that there's no playbook anymore. So, maybe what worked last year or even what worked in January just wasn't applicable in the new times. And at first, I think that's really challenging, because it means you have to scrap a lot of things that were working yesterday don't work anymore. I think from early stage startups are already pretty chaotic. Ideally, you've got a team that has sort of the resilience to manage that, but you couple an already chaotic just time for a company, and you throw all the playbooks out, and you bring in all the sort of personal challenges that are happening for everybody around the world. It's pretty crazy. But what it does mean is that I think it's Ryan Holiday has a book, The Obstacle is the Way, so stoicism thing. But within those challenges, those obstacles are new opportunities. And I think that for us, that has been the big theme. Is we're really fortunate that our team's been really optimistic and very resilient in saying, okay, this didn't work, but now it's something that didn't work yesterday is actually a totally viable traction channel or a totally viable way to build a product. And I think that's been very humbling and also really exciting for us.
And what were, Vish, what were some of the main challenges that you experienced over the last sort of 6 months as founders?
Yeah, I think so. We are relatively insulated from a lot of the big existential problems that a lot of startups or early stage companies, or even like really stalwart industries like cruise ships or airlines or clubs have had, right? Like, we're an education company, right? So like the demand has obviously gone up, and so our fires and problems and chaoses have been very different but positive.
Yeah.
Obviously there's the always challenging thing of managing expectations and of customers and of students and of all of the people who sit around our tables, but for us the biggest challenges have come as in the realms of communication, open two-way communication between us and customers, open communication between us and our investors. And by the way, I feel so fortunate for the investors that we have. Like, I don't know how many companies can say that they're like in love with all of their investors, but we think that every day. And sometimes we send emails and cookies and stuff just to show them, although we had to stop the cookie thing because of COVID. But anyway,
virtual cookies
from now. But the other challenge has been really checking on the personal status of every person on the team. When we do our hiring, we go through pretty rigorous culture fitting, I guess, to make sure, like, do these people have, like, these future teammates have all of the attributes that would make a great teammate in times of good and in times of bad. So that's things like communication, planning, resilience, all of the things that are a little hard to investigate and check on, but making sure that everybody's doing well during this time has been probably the biggest challenge. And but it's exciting. We really enjoy doing this.
There's sorry.
No, go on.
At the start, when we realized there was an opportunity, I think probably one of the hardest things for us is when finances get crazy and everything just sort of changed, we had to make a decision about whether we wanted to raise more capital and hire more people when the rest of the world was actually hunkering down. And so we went with our intuition and we raised more capital and hired more people. And so during, from end of February all the way through till now, we've added maybe 13 people to the team, all throughout that time. And I think that at that moment, it was really challenging because it was the opposite of what a lot of people were doing. But I think we're so glad that we did it. But that was a really interesting situation for us to navigate.
And where are your team situated, and what roles they play? Is it predominantly like development roles?
Yeah, so we're really lucky. So we're primarily based out of Boston, which is like an awesome place, proximal to New York, great space for startups, lots of students, awesome for education. Our team though comes from all sorts of places, Australia, Canada, the US. And so when sort of end of February, March happened, we said to everyone needs to go where they need to go. A lot of people wanted to or had to return home. A lot of our students, like interns, had to go home as well. And so the team right now is spread all over Canada, the US, India,
UK,
Australia,
Turkey,
Europe. We're fortunate that we always had a team that had started everywhere, so we had really good like remote skills. But I think that's a really interesting challenge as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had a great head start with that. How did working at the Harvard Innovation Lab influence what Sophya has become, Vish?
Yeah, so the Harvard Innovation Labs, aka the iLab, is it's just a phenomenal place for startups at any stage, because what happens there is there's like a bunch of different programs. Some are tailored to people who are just dabbling, like students or affiliated teammates who are just kind of dabbling in the startup scene, want to learn more about investors or mentors or tech, building, managing teams, etc., leadership. But then there are two specific programs. One is for earlier stage startups. There's cohorts of like 70 to 90 per semester that come in. There's like a reasonably good curriculum. When I say reasonably good, the curriculum is amazing. The coverage covers reasonably everything that they would need to know. And that's about a semester. And the people are, the teams are swamped with great mentorship and near peer advisors and just great curated programming. And so Emma and I, when we founded Sophya, we went through that program twice, one semester, then the following semester. Then Harvard launched its sort of elite incubator, where they accepted 10 teams from about 1,000 alumni applicant teams, and we were fortunate to be in that group of 10, and that was for companies who are really ready to take the next step. And from that point of view, it's a 9 to 12 month program where we got to meet some of our best hires from that program, some of our favorite investors. All of you guys are our favorites. Mentors that we just wouldn't have found otherwise, and even customers who you just see these random people walking through, and just like how Kevin and I met, I like to meet random people who are smiling. Kevin always has a smile on his face. And so, the iLab is just an amazing place for serendipity. That, I think, is one of the biggest losses in the COVID world, is that for people who love the spontaneous connection, we're trying to do our best with the virtual world we're building in Sophya, which we can talk about a little bit later. But the iLab had been phenomenal for facilitating all of that.
It's interesting, and Kathy, I'd be interested in your view, and Kevin on this, but the impact that COVID's had on education in general, and I think it's fantastic that you guys are building something that it feels like is sustainable and future fitting. And then you sort of see sort of the colleges and universities around the world that are really struggling, and I think having to change their model, because I think a lot of people are questioning, well, is it really worth me paying this for this kind of education when you're creating something in a virtual world which is possibly a lot more accessible and a lot more flexible as well. Kevin, what's your thoughts on sort of the future of education more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, just from my own individual experience, I would say in our industry, we were, as a group, behind the times, unfortunately. I think for our own educational platforms, for the way that we were trying to educate clients, as hard and as good of an effort we would give, there was always a little bit more. And I've actually found, getting back to that opportunity, and I'll keep it brief, but just being able to live a little bit more in this digital world, the scale piece of it is that much greater. And I'm finding that people are actually listening a little bit more and proactively seeking out ways to educate themselves, whether it's on culture, whether it's on personal finance, whether it's on cooking. I think that there's many ways, if you want to, and most people I'm seeing want to educate yourself. So I'm curious. I don't have the answers, but I am inspired by the engagement and activity right now.
Will you share, Emma and Vish, if you will, a bit about how the platform works, and sort of like when you go into Sophya, what can people expect, and what are the types of sort of different learning modules, or I'm not sure what you call them, but yeah, I'd love just to kind of be immersed in the product.
Sure. Did you want to go for it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the most important thing right now that I think people are finding is that without school, without campus, they're missing a lot of the social connection. And that doesn't just go for students. That goes for the relationship between faculty and students, or TAs and students, or TAs and faculty. There's all these sort of multi-connected networks that are missing a lot of important social connection. And we all know how important those are for education. And so with the recent virtual world release in Sophia, which we're like dubbing Sophia Town, we were thinking of calling it like Sophia Crossing, like Animal Crossing, because we love Animal Crossing, but that probably wouldn't fly. So right now there's, when students jump in, they can essentially immediately participate in spatial video chats with their friends, which means that, or their teachers, which means that they get taken into a class environment or a garden, or right now we're launching the moon, so people can hang out on the moon and do their studying. But essentially, classmates and students can sort of walk up to each other and their videos will automatically turn on, so they can just have a conversation, maybe stick together and do their studying, listen to music, and work together on collaborative sort of study tools that we have available. And when they're ready to jump off, they kind of just walk away from each other, and then the videos disconnect. And so it's a almost like a just-in-time social environment for students to do their learning in. So that's sort of the social aspect that has been the most important recently. Everything that we do is backed in the latest in neuroscience, learning science. And so we make available for every student learning tools that are proven to help people learn more efficiently and effectively. So things like spaced repetition, flashcards, if that's what people want to use, or tools to build really strong memory anchors, like the ability to write directly on videos, the ability to sort of use little neuroscience tricks to build stronger neuronal connections so that people can remember things easier. So things like effortful recall. So there's, when people get into Sophia, they can have the social learning experience that they're after. They can interact with and use all of their existing content, or if a university is on board with us, all of their content. And then on top of that, they can use all of the learning science tools.
And is it a combination of the learning science and the sort of neuroscience application that sets it apart from other education platforms out there? And it sounds like the social part is quite different to other education companies out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that especially in today's environment, the biggest thing setting us apart is the really realistic feeling and almost always personalized virtual world. So if, for example, we work really closely with Monash University, and they were one of our first big institutions that we worked with, and they're amazing. And for them, for each of their subjects, each of their courses, when students hop into those in Sophia, they're immediately taken to a space that they know. So some of the students asked for like their favorite coffee shop is the map that they navigate around in. Or maybe it's a classroom that, there's a classroom they have that they made especially for the medical students. It's like a common study space that has like beanbag chairs and, the right spacing of tables, and the deans hop in and they go and help people in small groups. So we just recreated that for them. So it's the first thing they experience when they go into Sophia. And I think that is the biggest differentiator, because it's not only personalized and trying to recreate what you're missing today, but as Vish sort of pointed out, it mimics the real life things that happen. You walk into a class, you see who's there, you walk up to a certain group, when you walk away, the video and microphone fade down. You can walk past someone and just wave and say hello, and then go off and put your do not disturb on and listen to your music. And I think that is differentiated and also just really needed right now. And I think, as you said too, to be able to wrap all that around learning tools to allow people to really engage with their learning material, especially during this remote time, is another differentiator. And those tools are really backed, like you said, in best learning practices, rather than sort of trying to take tools that exist today and sort of just put them out there and hope that they'll sort of, cover bases. We've found that during this time, we have to think the other way. We have to think about what are the problems people are having today, and let's make sure we build and focus on solutions that people really need.
I think the opportunity around this space is extraordinary. Kathy, I feel like this sort of opens up a whole world of like financial education. And how do you learn? How do you continue to learn? And how do your clients learn? Because I kind of feel like actually there's a perfect opportunity here to kind of create content around financial literacy.
Absolutely. I know when I first met Emma and Vish and they explained to me the company and how it worked, it's very it's like intuitive and very utilizing everything we're talking about. And we've talked about, Juliet, since COVID, the type of companies that are going to do well going forward. To me, Sophia is a disruptor, and it is a disruptor that is well prepared for what we just had, and the acceleration of digital transformation. That's what we've been talking about because of COVID and the way it's gone so much faster, and we've had to embrace it and learn how to, use digital transformation or the technology behind it a lot quicker. And the things that you guys are using, like digital transformation, the technology, the artificial intelligence, all the different things that are going into this are really forward thinking and sort of jumping into the future a little bit. So I always like to think about where the puck is going anyway, right? And you guys are building a business around where the quote unquote puck is going. So I'm really interested to see what happens with education, particularly higher education, because of the costs associated with it, and with an opportunity to learn differently and learn efficiently in a different way. I mean, it's a huge disruption, and it's a very positive one. So I think this is the wave of, this is where we're going. So, Woolworths used to be on the, on the Dow Jones, and it was taken out years ago. And, we just had more companies taken out and new, more advanced companies put on. It's a reflection of where we are in the current state of affairs and where we're going. So, and for finance, I remember speaking with you guys when we were in New York, and we were talking about, you were telling me more about the medical side of it, and the medical part you were working on. And then I was saying, well, this is really interesting, because I love financial education. I'm always trying to figure out how to educate our clients and anyone really on financial education. And you were talking about how you could implement this concept to almost any type of learning process. So I think that that's probably going to be really valuable. I think about, and I put together sort of an educational, like a finance education to help individuals learn as clients. And it's very simple and it's very traditional. And I think, wow, if you can take some of that information and then build it out in a different way, in a way that, Vish and Emma are talking about. I think it's very cool.
I'd love to talk a little bit about like how you're overcoming some of the barriers to education, like accessibility and inclusivity, and some of the thinking which I know you've done around, how do you reach kids that don't necessarily have access to the internet? Is there an opportunity here for learning for people with intellectual disabilities? Emma, would you share a bit about that?
Yeah, I think, I was saying to Vish earlier today, one of the several things that were aligning already in the education space before, February, was that we were just seeing these several trends of people taking their learning further in life, like sort of the lifelong learning trend of, I'm actually maybe going to pick up a whole new career at the age of, 40. That's totally normal. Younger and younger generations swapping jobs, more on the 2-year, 3-year, 4-year cycle rather than having a single career, which means upskilling more. So that's one really interesting trend. Another is just the technology that we have access to, the ability to create applications that can run on low bandwidth, internet, offline modes. There's all sorts of incredible things. Mobile access. So a lot of individuals in the world who've never had a computer like we started with mobile phones. And so when you collide all those things, you end up with some real opportunities for companies and especially startups in the space that can be really nimble. I think that we have the technology available and to really actually tackle these problems well. And so for us, we usually think about when we create something, we ideally want to create it for, say, the mobile device first, because that means we can build out the complexity from there. But if you start with, say, the lowest of bandwidth or the mobile device first, you know that you're going to be able to be accessible to the majority of people. And you can layer the fancy on. So one thing I think we were talking about the other day is, can you have an opportunity to turn down, the resolution of something, say a video, so that it's not taking up, all of your computer power or your bandwidth, and that opens up something to more people. And then if you're in a better connection or you have better, technology available, you can turn it up again to really get it fancy. And so I think those kinds of things are really important. Another is just thinking about, again, we have the technology and the knowledge available to us to say, what are color palettes that we should be using so that, anyone with color blindness can still access all of our icons and utilize our app. Like, I think we know that information now, and there are a lot of ways to layer that into an application really easily. So I think those are the principles. You can touch on more if you want, but those are the principles that we use when building. We think, what's the most accessible, and then how can we build out from there?
I think the only thing I would add to that is that our team really beats the drum on inclusivity, as they should, as we should. And so anything that I'm confident that any new developments in technology or, minimizing compute power to expand access, we will definitely be doing those things.
What's the youngest and oldest user that's used the platform?
Oh, great question. I would say our youngest is probably around 9.
I wouldn't know, because I don't think we know. I know
we know with kids.
Yeah, we know anecdotally, but I don't even think we can access that.
We also obviously taking him. So when you have anyone under a certain age has parental consent. So that's the sort of the reason I know is it's tricking. Okay, I know we've got some parental consent forms that have been signed. So and I think there's more and more opportunities for the younger kids, especially during this time, because as we were saying, I think before we hopped on, education right now is really challenging for parents that have kids at home still, where schools aren't reopening or they don't want to send them. Oldest?
The oldest is a person who is in their 60s who is learning about computer science.
Oh yeah, okay.
So that's very cool. Very
We've
inspiring.
lately had a lot of parents in the virtual world. Parents that are separated from members of our team. We're very keen on popping into the office and saying hello.
And your Sophia is in 87 schools across the world, is that right?
Sophia is in 87 countries across the world.
Right, okay. I'm interested in, now schools have gone back, what has business been like as schooling started up again? Have you seen any shifts?
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of alluded to earlier, we're not the cruise ship or the airline, so things have been generally trending in the right direction for us. I think the most exciting thing about back to school is that we're just meeting so many more people whose problems we can help to solve. And for us, when we help them to solve these problems in ways that maybe they didn't necessarily think about, so things like just the nice, beautiful interfaces and the intuitiveness of the user experience, and the light bulb that we love to see with all these schools is, and you know, when I say schools, I mean the people who make up these schools, so faculty and admin and students, is wow, I didn't realize that like online learning was supposed to be so fun and easy. And so for us, we're just excited by all of the opportunities to solve lots more problems for lots more people, and that's what happens when school opens up.
And we're also seeing such a variety in opening. Like some schools are trying to open up fully. Some schools are doing sort of a mix. Some schools are trying to do certain in-person activities that can be distanced, but learning is online. So as Vish said, that opens up all sorts of things that we can help tackle. And you know, there's always surprising things that come out. So one of the things that we've had is for students whose schools are opening up, one of the things that they're going to miss is that dorm experience. You know, especially for the seniors and the freshmen, like that's a really big part, especially in the US, of college life. And so that's again where the virtual worlds have been really interesting, is students personalizing spaces to actually look like their dorms. And that allows them to have the dorm life sort of sitting alongside what may be other in-person activities. So I think that's something we'd never anticipated at all. So there's all sorts of like interesting opportunities there.
I think,
Yeah.
oh, just
No, go on.
quickly say that I think one of the interesting things though is that we're very aware that the landscape is continuing to evolve. And so it's not like just because we're in September, okay, great, this is what it's going to be. Like things are going to be continually changing. And, you know, on our team alone, we have, you know, 4 students who have deferred their year. They're going to stay full time with Sophia. They were supposed to be interns, but they've decided to defer, and that's going to cost their universities about $250K US, right, combined. Just these 4 students on our team. It's crazy. And you know, so while that paints one picture for a lot of universities, the other picture that we're seeing being painted in real time is that universities are starting to understand, wow, we can still run virtual school and charge tuition for students who are all over the world. We can include them in our rosters and, you know, charge full tuition and grant degrees and all of that, which really changes what a lot of schools are thinking about their business models going forward. Because essentially that's unchecked enrollment potential, assuming you have the support available. So this is a very, very much evolving space. There are some losses for schools, but there's going to be a lot of gains as well.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting just thinking about the pricing structure from physical to virtual as well for those schools. And the business model for Sophia, it's a subscription-based model, right?
That's right.
Right. I have to, we're going to go to a question in a minute. I think Justin has a couple of great questions, but I would like to ask just learning to work with one another, given we've got family on this session today. So as spouses and also as mother and son, what are some of the learnings around learning to work together? And I know, Vish and Emma, you shared this amazing tool that you use with you, not just you both, but with the team. What's it been like co-founding a business together?
It is really fun. I think that the tool we shared is called the Predictive Index. Is a really cool tool that basically allows you to take an assessment and see how your work style sort of maps to different sort of buckets of work styles. And so when Vish and I took that assessment for ourselves, so we could, and it allows you to see how you work with others. So for example, my style name isn't very friendly sounding, but it's called a controller. I promise I'm not a control freak.
No, she's not.
Vish is a maverick, which won't surprise anyone that knows him. And when you actually look at the profiles, it shows you like, okay, how do a maverick and a controller work well together? Where are they like, what did you say, a 1-2 punch? And where do they like, you know, butt up against each other? And it was really funny to read it because we're like, oh, that's exactly what happens. Like that's when we're really powerful, and that's when we like have some friction. And so I think that when you can find out, and we sort of found out over time where we work well together and where we bump up, but especially when you're given sort of a little bit more insight, it just allows you to supercharge how you work together. And I think what we learned from Predictive Index is that every style of person can work really well together. You just need to know each other and know, you know, for example, a maverick always wants to give like these big, crazy ideas, visionary ideas, and a controller wants to drill down into the details of how we're actually going to implement it. And that's actually really important collaboration. But to the maverick, when I ask a lot of detailed questions, it can sound like I'm actually doubting the idea, but in reality, I'm trying to figure out how to implement it. So I think when you work together and you can understand those things about each other, it's like super powerful.
It has completely changed how we approach relationships, how we approach hiring. Like I probably would never like hire without doing this thing first, so that I can see like, well, you know what, like your CV and other things that you've done, that's like, to me, that's like 25% now instead of 100. And 75% is like, well, where do you fit in the team in terms of what our strategic goals are as a company? And then your fit within that, and then within the team. So there's just so many layers of complexity that human nature and personalities bring in. And I you know, that has really helped. Just to go back to your question about how it's been working together.
And Kevin and Kathy, have you done anything like that?
Yeah, actually, I'll let Kevin speak in a minute. I'm sorry, Kevin, but yes, every time we hire somebody, we actually do utilize some of these personality and strength programs. And we have 2 that we've used, and both names are escaping me right now, but I will look them up because the last hire we had was over a year ago. But yes, and it's pretty interesting how clear that can be. I don't think we've used it as powerfully as you guys have, but I think it's really important. And just like, you know, when you think about yourself, I know if I'm doing something that feels hard, like I'll do things, technology actually feels really hard to me. I'll do it. And people say, well, you're fine on technology. I'm like, yes, but it exhausts me because it's not my strength, right? But the things that are my strength energize me. So if you can find what energizes each team member and have them in the role that energizes them, then that is also really powerful. Do you want to that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the energy point. I think just kind of, especially if you're in career transitions or you're in a particularly challenging time, I think just capturing those moments when you remember when you were most energized and what it was you were doing. A mentor of mine told me that a long time ago, and I always carry that with me. Kevin.
Yeah, I would actually take the other side, because Kathy covered it really well there. From a team perspective, it's kind of like that good to great book where it's just about getting the right people on the bus first, and then you can find the seed and how they fit in. But the other side of it would be, how do we assess our clients' personalities too? Because that's the behavioral aspect of finance has been a really big deal forever, but it's becoming even more of a focus. So there's a lot of really cool ways that we do that. Kathy mentioned with the discovery meetings, and really, really digging for, like, we call them waterfall questions, where it's like tertiary or secondary, tertiary, where we're really digging for answers and understanding what kind of risk tolerance they have. So that's a big piece of our work as well.
Thank you. Justin, I'm going to come to you if you're there and if we can hear you. Otherwise, I'll read out your question. Justin, are you there? Can we hear Justin? Okay, not to worry. I'm going to read out the question. So the first question was, when we think about different socioeconomic situations at the national level? Other types of nation situations that are particularly well suited to the online learning experience?
That's a really interesting question. You know, and I'm glad you asked it, because that is the learnings from your question are exactly one of the reasons why we built Sophya. Essentially, the initial thesis was that we have no good scalable way of educating people on the planet, right? We have really good ways of educating like 6,000 people a year at Harvard, but not everybody on the planet, right? And so the only way forward, if we want to do things in an equitable way, is to build a scalable system that takes advantage of data, right? Obviously in a like data compliant and privacy centered way, that can give every person, regardless of their socioeconomic status, regardless of the sort of GDP of their country, an educational experience that is informed by students who are really, really successful. Because that's really one of the best ways to level the playing field, because it's outcome informed. So love your question. What we're trying to do is make that experience available so that it doesn't matter what country people are from. So that's where actually our initial data sets are coming from.
Or what neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And it is, I'm sorry, go on, Emma.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say one big lesson that at least I learned at the WHO was how, and I think this is really just a how to build products thing as well, which is often we go the wrong way and we think, I have a great solution and I'm going to apply it to these different areas. And I think when we talk about like, you know, these types of questions, we really have to be thinking, what are the different challenges that are going to be present for different people, and how are we actually going to tackle those in our solution? And, you know, the WHO is just amazing. Like, it's not that Switzerland didn't have challenges for smoking cessation programs. They had all sorts of challenges, but their infrastructure, their government structure, their communication structure was so different than India's, just cultural. And so I think understanding all of those and making sure that if you're going to try to apply a solution to different places, whether it's a different neighborhood, country, school system, you have to be thinking backwards and forwards.
Thank you. And we've managed to get Justin on here now for your second question. Hi, Justin.
Hello there. Thank you for bringing me on the tech. Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
Brilliant. And I'm in my brother's shop. You can see some of his stock behind. But my other question that I had was around, okay, call me a little bit old-fashioned, and some of you know that I deliver a lot of training face-to-face. And one of the things that I'm very conscious of, particularly through the lockdowns, is that, you know, maybe there's this kind of almost growing craving for people to be back face to face. I don't know, do you consider that a future threat to what you're doing, or do you just think it's going to run in parallel and just alter your growth curve a little bit as you look forward?
That's such a great question. And I think that's like a real question for any space that's kind of doing well right now. The real question is, what is sort of just the next year and a bit? What is temporary? What is lasting? And what is lasting because there's a problem? And what is lasting because the whole space has changed? So I love that question. I think for us, what we see is that, you know, I think Vish, you touched on this a little bit from the school's perspective. I think one thing that this situation has taught them is that, you know, and some of them won't apply this at all, and some of them will, but what has taught them is there are opportunities now to be able to deliver curriculum and degrees to students, you know, anywhere in the world. And that opens up, you know, the ability to charge tuition to different students, whether that cost structure changes or whatnot. But it just allows their spread to be further in, and the technology that will come out of this time for those that sort of work during this time on technology will just be, you know, potentially a decade ahead of where it might have been if the space hadn't changed. And so it just opens up those opportunities. And I think the other thing is that from a student's perspective, while I think the spring term is clunky, it's also shown students that, you know, they can access their schools and their degrees from anywhere in the world. There are other ways to educate themselves. And so their whole perspective on education and where it should take place has also shifted. I think those things will persist in ways that's a bit hard to predict right now, but for us, our biggest challenge will just be to make sure we ebb and flow with those changes and continue to fit into existing problems and not applying our solution to the same things if the situation has changed.
I think the other addition there is, so I completely agree with that. I was having a conversation with the old managing director of the iLab, Chris Colbert. I try to call him Chris Colbert, but he gets upset when I do that for some reason. I'm not sure why. But one of the things that he brought up was that at Harvard and at many other schools, what the structure of the university should be, and it isn't, is it should be like the chancellery and then the ed school that has like all of the research and all of the sort of data backed best practices in learning that literally they focus on all the time. And then that should then stream through to inform how all the other schools are taught. But that's not how things work. And it's a shame, because we do a lot of things in schools today that we know are not very good for our students, right? And that goes up and down the chain of learning. That's from like wake up times for teenagers, which we know is not optimal for brain development and just the way that they're growing. And that's, you know, the way that we test, the way that we use multiple choice questions, there's so much in education that is not data informed, and actually is data informed that is the wrong way, but we still do it. And so one of the best takeaways from this situation that's happening in the world right now, I picture it as like a crossing guard who's like stopping the flow of traffic with the big red stop sign to sort of let all of the good best practices and technology, like assisted by technology or not, into the fray so that they can be experienced and felt before the flow of traffic can resume, which is human interaction with each other in education systems again. Really, I think it's a reckoning that education has had to face for a long time, but now this is a great forcing function for it to happen. And for the record, I think it would be a crying shame if we didn't return to like 95% in person for all the things that we should be doing in person, right? I mean, like we talked about earlier, Kevin and I met in an Uber because we're social animals, right? So
I think the ideal situation, though, is that we do the things we should do in person, and then we do the things we shouldn't do in person, not in person. And I think that's like our sweet spot that we should be striving for. And I think this situation creates an opportunity to try to find that balance.
Thank you for that, Justin. I know we've got to wrap this up. I would like to ask Emma, what's it next in store for Sophia? What's on your sort of roadmap for the sort of next 12 months? And Vish, what excites you about this next phase in education?
Yeah, so the response to being able to give people personalized spaces to have like real life, like bump-ins and interactions. Like Kevin, we're going to invite you into our office space later. You know, you can just pop in. It's like, you can just say hi and pop out. People really, really, really are responding to that. And it's because of what we talked about here, is that we really need it. So for us, I see the next, at least a good chunk of 12 months is just really working to make that personalized, to really fit into the places it should be. And to really make sure that the experience has those little, like, they're little things that make it really feel like you are having those interactions with people. And I think that's going forward with how school's going to play out over this, probably the next year at least. I think that's going to fit right into the problems that people are going to have. So I see us just really focusing on creating personalized spaces that really feel as close to real life as we can.
Thank you.
And in terms of the thing that excites me, there's a book called Delivering Happiness that probably many of you guys have read. Tony Hsieh, CEO Zappos, and I feel very much the same way as him when he says, like, the thing that makes him happy and excites him is really that a problem is being solved, a big problem is being solved for his people, and people are able to reach, I mean, this is probably less similar to Zappos and more Sophia, but people are able to reach their goals that they weren't necessarily able to reach as easily. And that is a result of reducing confusion, reducing sort of like aberrant pathways that might be in someone's way, and connecting them to people who may be able to help them reach their goals and sort of kind of launch their trajectory, whether it's career, personal, or whatever, financial, ideally, right, Kathy? So those are the things that excite me, is just all the opportunities for this as we continue to train our models and provide spaces for people to learn.
Thank you. Kathy, what excites you about the next phase in learning and education?
Well, it's really interesting because I literally just joined the board of my alma mater's business school, the Business School Advisory Council. And so I am thinking a lot about, education's always been very important to me. And I'm thinking a lot about what is the future of education. And just this conversation today, it just opens your mind and expands it to, you know, what is out there, and that there are ways to not only learn differently and more efficiently, but also close the gap of the disparity between those who have had the opportunities and those who have not, to be able to provide opportunities and equal the playing field. I think that would be really, really amazing to be able to do. So that is what I'm inspired with.
I agree. And Kevin, what's inspiring you about this next phase?
A lot of things, but I'm actually going to go back to what Vish said, and the idea of being able to build off of your already knowledge, and having like an easier or more efficient way of going about it. And I also really like what Emma said too, with changing career paths, whether it's good, bad, frowned upon or not. I do think that there is a little bit of this immediate gratification, which can be debatable, but it's there. And I think the idea that you can pivot and you can explore different passions, I would imagine Sophia is going to be really helpful in that case as well. In both of those spaces, the people that are really building more knowledge quicker and more efficiently, and the group of people that want to start a new knowledge base. So that's very exciting to me.
I agree, and I think it's an incredible work that you're both doing, and I wish you everything but the best of luck in developing and scaling the business even further, because I think it's a really exciting space. Vish, Emma, Kevin, and Kathy, thank you so much for a great and insightful and mind-opening discussion. It was a really great conversation, so thank you, and a special thank you to you, Kathy, our private wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley, for being a partner in this series. And most importantly, thanks to everyone that joined us today and for your great questions. Thank you to Justin as well for your great engagement. Please do share any feedback with us. We'd love to hear your comments. You can email us at community@worth.com. Next week at Worth Live, for the next normal on Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, we'll be talking about security intelligence and the rapidly evolving risk environment with special guest Dale Buckner, CEO at Global Guardian, Ashley Hunter, founder at HM Risk Group, and Dale Brooks, director at Hawk Protection, which is another really interesting startup, along with Kathy Entwistle, private wealth advisor at Morgan Stanley. We also have our 3-day virtual Women in Worth Summit next week, from Tuesday to Thursday lunchtime. So please register online for both of these events at worth.com/events. As well as sign up for our newsletters as well. In the meantime, be kind, stay healthy and well and safe, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Juliet. Thanks,
Thank you.
Vish. Thank you.